So I have played the Metal Gear Solid remake for the GameCube, but I never finished it. And of course, I've seen a lot of gameplay footage. I mention that because I was pleasantly surprised to see that the core gameplay loop of MGS, which is sneak around and take out enemies, is the exact same gameplay loop of the original Metal Gear, released 11 years prior. Also, I find myself having fun. Not bad for a game that was made the year I was born. Always nail your gameplay loop before you develop anything else in your game. Core mechanics will carry your game much longer than a compelling story or pretty visuals. This hide-and-seek mechanic has been around a long time. Being a Zelda fan, I couldn't help but think of the Hyrule Castle Garden segment of Ocarina of Time. This kind of stealth gameplay requires a different sort of patience than platformers and more combat-based games. But pattern recognition and memorization is still a big part of successful gameplay. I can see why people love this game. The weapons and item system all revolve around the stealth gameplay and function very much like a Metroidvania. Using the guided rocket for the first time was also pretty cool. There are lots of edits because I'm dying a lot. Even coming off of a playthrough through Ninja Gaiden Ragebound, I find myself having to shift my modern gaming mindset to an older one where deaths are to be expected. To my shame, I even wished I had a rewind function. Thankfully, that's not on the Steam release. Deaths in this game are handled very well. You don't go all the way back to the start of the game after a few deaths, but you do go back to certain checkpoints. This requires you to get familiar with the map and enemy movements. Over time, this results in a deeper connection to the game as a whole because of the forced repetition. In a poorly designed game, this becomes a slog. In a well-designed game, it becomes a memorable and enriching experience for the player. Progress is slow, which is mostly due to me having little time to play. I'll give it a few more days before I use a walkthrough for content generation purposes, or start a live stream of me dying over and over so one or two people can watch my misery. I hesitate to use a walkthrough for a few reasons. One, I'm an adult and I should be able to beat this game, and two, it hurts my pride. On a more serious note, all the backtracking and replaying various segments forces the player to have a more, for lack of a better word, intimate relationship with the game world. If that makes any sense. It transforms a game you just played and beat to a game you really knew, experienced, and overcame. Progress! I love how Snake just punches down the walls in his cell. I probably shouldn't have used the guided rockets to take out Shotmaker, but it certainly made things easier. I definitely won't regret it later. I hope. So I truly am a rookie spy like Snake. I didn't realize that transmitter item on me could be interacted with, so I just accepted at this point that in-game, everywhere, was on high alert, and the enemies always knew where I was. I made progress though and got a ton of ammo, so it's not a total loss. So I guess it's a good thing I didn't deactivate the transmitter right away, as I wasted a ton of ammo trying to beat Machine Gun Kid. I love the names of the bosses. I also needed some help to get the bomb blast suit. I didn't want to use a guide, but real-world time was of the essence. I did at least have some idea of what to do. I just wish the game required you to blow up a wall with explosives prior to this so you understood how the mechanic worked. Not properly teaching the player how to do certain things or what was expected of you was a common problem in many older games. Anyone who's ever played Castlevania 2 will recall the infamous cliffside tornado. I destroyed a helicopter! These older games are pretty interesting in that some bosses almost require the use of a degenerate strategy. The helicopter had a blind spot that I exploited, but I'm not sure a player could beat it otherwise unless they had a ton of rations. But then again, I didn't try to not use the blind spot, so maybe I'm wrong. I never played this back in the day, so I don't know if the original had this feature, but after dying a lot to the tank, I was suddenly given max ammo on everything. It was nice and it saved me a lot of time from having to wander around finding mine drops, but in general, I don't like dynamic difficulty adjustment. Here I would say it was used to cover up a design flaw that is common in older games. That being, using items too early can result in you not being able to progress an hour later. The gamer in me wanted to start over, but the parent... I definitely used a walkthrough for this part, and I'm glad I did. I miss game manuals. They added something physical about buying a game that added to the experience. Apparently there's a frequency in the manual that you aren't told about in-game. The guy you talk to tells you where the enemy uniform is. I love that use of the game manual. The only modern game I can think of that makes use of manuals in this way is Tunic, I think, but I could be wrong. Well, a map would be extremely helpful. I sort of like that there isn't a map, as it forces me to get to know the game world. It's kind of like driving back in the day before GPS. You memorize directions intuitively only after making a trip somewhere once or twice. Back in these days of gaming, due to hardware and software limitations, developers were forced to trust the player to figure out things on their own, rather than spell everything out with yellow paint and waypoints. I totally fell for the fake doctor trap. It was frustrating and unfair as there was no warning, which is something you want to avoid as a game developer. When it comes to failure, you want to try and make it so that if the player fails, they understand it was their fault due to a lack of skill or they weren't paying attention. Thankfully, I only lost a couple of minutes of playtime, so I found it more funny than anything else. Fire Trooper was similar to the helicopter, found a blind spot and then used the OP guided rockets to take him down. Very little progress today. What you're seeing represents 32 minutes of playtime. This is what I get for trying to figure things out on my own. I'm beginning to really understand that video game design back in the 80s and early 90s was really still in its infancy, and game devs hadn't quite figured out the difference between hard, which is a skill issue, and too hard, which is a game design issue. What I find interesting is that games these days seem to have the opposite issue. They are either easy, some challenge presented, or too easy, little or no challenge presented. This took way longer than it should have. This game hits you with the 1-2 punch of making you be patient, but then having you retrace your steps a lot when you die, which makes you impatient. 5 minutes of footage for 30 minutes of gameplay. I need to step up my game. So I'm slowly making progress. If there's one takeaway from playing the original Metal Gear, it is that I am surprised to see how there is consistency of gameplay from this entry to at least Metal Gear Solid, and I think the subsequent entries. Essentially, both games, separated by 11 years, and vast improvements in technology, have the same gameplay loop, and it works in both games. Despite my frustrations playing Metal Gear, it is fun to sneak around and save the world. I got impatient here and just decided to Rambo my way through. I broke down and started using a guide. My quest to S++ on Ninja Gaiden Ragebound really slowed down my content generation, so I had to speed things up. When I get to Metal Gear 2, I'll probably try it on my own first before I use a guide, so we'll see what happens. Nearing the end of this game, it's crazy to think that I've logged 7 hours of playtime, but could probably complete the game in 1 or 2 hours if I made no mistakes. Many older games were like this and encouraged multiple playthroughs even though there were little to no incentive to do so. Kids like to relive experiences more than adults, which is why, if you owned this game when you were a kid, you probably beat it a handful of times at least. I'm glad I played it, but I will probably never pick it up again. Good old Dirty Duck. I absolutely love the boss names in this game. Okay, almost to Metal Gear. 1 or 2 more episodes should do it. There it is in all its glory. Metal Gear. And it doesn't really do anything. I definitely did not memorize the sequence to defeat it. It was a nice twist at the end with Big Boss 2. This was a fun retro experience, and I can see how this game laid the groundwork for subsequent Metal Gear games. Hardware limitations really hindered the overall vision of the game that I think wouldn't be realized until Metal Gear Solid. Okay, on to Metal Gear 2. Maybe those in the comments can tell me if they played the original, if there was a scorecard at the end. I just saw that my rank was Deer, and I really like how older games used to make fun of you for not performing well. We should bring that back, I think.